My name is Cole Merritt, and I want to tell you something that took me 3 years, two lawyers, and one very quiet Christmas dinner to finally understand. I grew up in a house where love was conditional and money was a weapon. Not the kind of house that looks broken from the outside. From the outside, we looked fine. My parents had a nice split level in Dayton, Ohio. My mother kept hydrangeas in the front yard. My father coached Little League one summer when I was 8, and people in the neighborhood thought he was great. They didn't live with him. I have one sibling, my brother. I'll call him what everyone called him growing up. The golden one. Not because I'm bitter, though I'll admit there were years I was. I call him that because that's genuinely how my parents treated him. Whatever he needed appeared. Whatever I needed was negotiated. He's 2 years older than me. He got a car at 16. I got told to save up. He dropped out of community college, and my parents didn't say a word. I graduated from Ohio State with a degree in accounting and got a nod and a handshake from my father that lasted about 1 second. I'm not telling you this so you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this so you understand the water I was swimming in. When you grow up in that kind of house, you don't realize how abnormal it is until you're standing in someone else's kitchen one day and their parent calls just to check in, not to ask for something, and you feel physically confused by it. I moved to Columbus after graduation, got a decent job at a mid-sized firm. I was doing fine, not rich, but stable. I had savings, I had a plan. And then, about 18 months into my job, I started getting headaches that wouldn't quit. I won't drag you through the whole medical timeline because that's not the point of this story. The short version is that after several weeks of tests, my doctor referred me to a specialist, and the specialist found something that needed to come out. A mass. Benign, most likely, but in a place where most likely wasn't good enough. Surgery was scheduled. The cost, even with my insurance, was going to leave a significant gap. The procedure was specialized. The surgeon was out of network. I had the money saved. $22,000 sitting in an account I'd been building since I started working, specifically for emergencies. This qualified. Here's where my family enters the story. About a month before the surgery date, I had a plumbing disaster in my apartment. Full pipe burst, water everywhere. I had to vacate for 2 weeks while repairs were done. I was temporarily staying with a friend across town. During that transition, I asked my parents, specifically my mother, if I could have medical correspondence sent to their Dayton address temporarily, just for 2 weeks, just so nothing important got lost in the shuffle of me moving between places. She said, of course. She said that's what family is for. That sentence. I should have heard the echo in it. So the hospital was sending my pre-op paperwork, my surgical date confirmation, and my insurance adjustment letters to my parents' house. I updated it with the hospital as a temporary address. I told my mother explicitly, if anything comes from St. Vincent's or from my insurance company, please call me immediately. She said she would. She didn't. 3 weeks passed. I'd moved back into my repaired apartment. I called to ask if anything had arrived. My mother said no. I called the hospital directly. They confirmed the paperwork had been sent. I asked when. They told me the date. It had been sitting at my parents' house for 11 days. I drove to Dayton that Saturday. My father was watching football when I walked in. My mother was in the kitchen. I sat down at the table and I asked, calmly, whether anything had come in the mail for me. My mother went to a drawer in the kitchen and pulled out a manila envelope. She set it on the table in front of me like it was nothing. Like it was a magazine subscription renewal. I opened it. My surgical date had been 2 days ago. 2 days. I had missed my surgery window because no one called me. I looked at my mother and I asked her why she hadn't told me. She sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table, and she said very calmly that things had been hectic. My brother had been going through something. She didn't want to add to my stress. My father didn't look up from the television. I want you to sit with that for a second. A man finds out he has a mass in his head that needs to be surgically removed. He specifically asks his family to watch for medical mail. The mail arrives, his surgery date is on it, and his mother decides, quietly, privately, without a single phone call, that it wasn't the right time to mention it. I didn't yell. I've thought about that moment a lot since then, and I'm glad I didn't yell. I just sat there holding that envelope and I asked one more question. I asked if anything else had come. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at the television. Then she told me, she said that 2 weeks before the surgical date confirmation arrived, a letter had come from my insurance company. It flagged a discrepancy. Apparently, a claim had been filed, not by me, not by the hospital, but through my account, and the insurance company had sent a notice requesting clarification. They had also, as a precaution, placed a temporary hold on major claim processing, pending my response. There was a deadline on that letter. I had missed it by 3 weeks. I asked her what claim she was talking about. She said she didn't know. She said she hadn't opened it because it wasn't her mail. I drove home to Columbus that night in complete silence. I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I just drove and thought. And somewhere around the halfway point on I-70, I started to understand the shape of what had happened. Before I tell you what I found out next, I want to ask you something. Can you drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from? It genuinely helps more than you know. I'll be right back in the story. When I got home, I pulled up my insurance portal. I requested a detailed claims history for the past 90 days. The claim that had triggered the hold was for a dental procedure, a significant one, bone grafting, 2 implants, the kind of dental work that runs over $12,000. The claim had been submitted under my policy, my social security number, my account, but I hadn't had any dental work done. I'll give you one guess who had. I called my insurance company the next morning. I explained that I had not authorized the claim. They walked me through the verification trail. The claim had been submitted by a dental office in Dayton. The appointment was in my name. The patient, however, when I tracked down the records through a formal dispute request, had a different date of birth. My brother's. Someone had used my insurance to pay for my brother's dental implants. $12,000. And the flag on my account, the one that required my response within a 30-day window, had been sitting at my parents' house in an envelope my mother chose not to open, or so she said, while my surgery date came and went. I want to be honest about how I felt in that moment because I think it matters. I didn't feel rage. I felt something worse. I felt the pieces of a very old puzzle finally locking into place. The car at 16, the tuition that was somehow always available for his failed attempts at school, the way my parents would casually mention they were a little short some months when I was visiting, never asking directly, just mentioning it, and I would always offer. I felt like a person who had been contributing to their own exploitation for years without understanding the mechanism of it. I did not call my parents. I did not send a text. I did not drive back to Dayton. I called an attorney. Her name is not relevant, but she was very good. I found her through my firm's HR department. They had a legal referral program for employees. I explained the situation. She explained to me very clearly that what had been done was insurance fraud. That using someone's policy number and identity to submit a claim for a procedure performed on a different person is a federal offense. That my missing a surgery window because medical correspondence was deliberately withheld was a separate matter, potentially actionable as negligence. She told me to document everything and not to contact my family yet. So I documented. I pulled every record I could access, the claims history, the original dispute notice with the postmark date proving when it arrived in Dayton, text messages from my mother saying she would watch my mail, the hospital's records confirming when they mailed my pre-op documents. I built a paper trail that was, as my attorney later described it, unusually clean. I also did something that I think was the most clarifying thing I have ever done in my adult life. I went back through my financial records for the previous 3 years. Every time I had helped my family, every Venmo transfer, every check I wrote, every time I handed my father cash at the door when he said they were short on something, I added it up. The number was over $31,000. I sat with that number for a long time. $31,000. That was not including the $12,000 that had been taken through my insurance. That was not including the surgical rescheduling fees I was now facing, or the time I had lost, or the stress of having a medical issue go unaddressed for additional weeks because of a missed window. That was just the cash I could document. I want to stop here and say something directly. I know some of you watching this have families that work the same way, where one person is quietly, consistently treated as the resource and another person is treated as the priority, where asking for basic consideration is somehow read as selfishness, where you have given and given and given and called it love because you didn't know what else to call it. If that's you, I need you to hear what I'm about to say. It wasn't love. It was a system, and you were never the beneficiary. My attorney advised me on next steps. I had options. I could file a formal insurance fraud report, which would trigger an investigation that would likely result in criminal charges for whoever submitted the claim. I could also pursue civil action for the documented financial transfers under undue influence grounds. She laid it all out clearly and professionally, and then she said, "What do you want the outcome to be?" I sat with that question for 2 days. What did I want? I thought about it honestly. I didn't want my brother in prison. I didn't want my parents' house taken. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. But I also knew, and this is the part I want you to really hear, I knew that if I did nothing, it would happen again. Not because my family was uniquely evil, but because the system we had always operated in had never once faced a consequence. Nothing changes without consequence. I decided on a middle path. I filed the insurance fraud report. I had no choice. Legally, my attorney explained that failing to report known fraud while simultaneously disputing the claim created liability for me. The insurance company launched their investigation. That was out of my hands. For the personal money, I sent a formal demand letter through my attorney to my parents. Not angry. Not emotional. Just documented, itemized, and legal. $31,000 with records attached. And then I waited. Christmas that year was 3 weeks after the letter arrived. My mother called me twice. I didn't answer. My father called once. I didn't answer. My brother texted me. The first time he had texted me in almost 8 months and said we needed to talk. I responded with my attorney's contact information. Christmas morning, I woke up in my apartment in Columbus. I made coffee. I called my grandmother, who was 81 and lives in a retirement community in Sarasota and has always been, without exception, the most honest person in my family. She didn't know any of the details of what had happened. I didn't tell her. I just talked with her for an hour about nothing important. The weather in Florida, a book she was reading, a woman in her building who was learning watercolor painting at 79 and apparently was quite good. It was the best Christmas morning I'd had in years. By February, the insurance investigation had reached a conclusion. The claim had been fraudulently submitted by the dental office, working in coordination with someone who had provided my insurance credentials. My brother was identified in that process. He was not charged criminally. The insurance company recovered their funds through a settlement agreement and chose not to pursue prosecution in exchange for repayment. But it is on record. It exists. His name is attached to it in a way that cannot be cleanly undone. My parents responded to the demand letter through a family friend who fancied himself a mediator. He called me and told me the family was very hurt by my actions. I told him to have them respond through my attorney. He called again a week later and told me they were prepared to discuss. I gave him my attorney's number again. They never called her. My surgeon rescheduled me for March. The procedure went smoothly. The mass was removed, confirmed benign, and I was cleared within 6 weeks. I recovered in my apartment. A friend from work brought me food for the first 3 days. A neighbor walked my dog. The people who showed up were not the people whose names would have been on an emergency contact form 3 years earlier. That told me something. It's been 14 months since all of this happened. I have not spoken to my brother. There are people who hear this and say that's extreme. That family is family. That I should forgive. I want to address that directly because I think forgiveness gets misused as an argument for proximity. I don't hate my family. I genuinely don't. What I feel is closer to clarity. I spent the first 3 decades of my life inside a dynamic that I mistook for normal because I had never stood outside it. The moment I stood outside it and saw it documented, itemized, and sitting in a $31,000 spreadsheet, I couldn't go back in. Not because of anger, because of what I now knew. Forgiveness, the real kind, doesn't require you to put yourself back in harm's way. It doesn't require shared dinners or returned calls or pretending the paper trail doesn't exist. You can forgive someone completely and still choose not to hand them your mail. I have a good life right now. It's quieter than it used to be. The holidays are different, smaller, sometimes a little strange, always something I have to build intentionally instead of falling into by default. But they're mine. I make choices that are actually mine. I spend money on things I choose. I don't feel the low-level hum of obligation that I now recognize was present in almost every interaction I had with my family for my entire adult life. If you are in a version of this situation, if you have people in your life who treat your resources as available and your needs as optional, I want to say this clearly. You are allowed to audit your own life. You are allowed to look at the numbers and the dates and the documented record and call it what it is. You are allowed to stop being the account that other people draw from. You are allowed to change your mailing address, literally and figuratively. You are allowed to build a life where the people around you show up, not because they need something from you, but because they actually want to be there. It won't be easy to do. The first months are strange. You will second guess yourself. You will find old habits, the reflex to explain yourself, to soften the edges, to make your own legitimate anger smaller so that other people stay comfortable. Let yourself notice that reflex, and then don't follow it. You are not a resource. You are a person, and the difference between those two things is worth protecting, even when, especially when, the people who need to hear it are the ones you grew up calling family. I'm Cole Merritt. Thank you for listening.